So that's our focus today on going through the code. Again, I had a special thanks to Rick, and Rick invited me to come out and visit some of his locations to do some actual training. So these are the dates that we had figured out today. That's what I was trying to do at the last minute to put these on a map for us. So the goal is that I'll be in Lafayette on the 20th, the 21st I'll be in Baton Rouge, and the 22nd will be in Heharon. I'm sure I'm probably mispronouncing that, so I apologize. There may be some other places where I'll stop or go further north in Louisiana. So the goal is to actually do the hands-on part of it. This is the basic tester. I want to go through some fundamental stuff that's actually just part of the equipment in general, and I will cover the code in depth. So this is the DU341 duct tester that Retrotec sells, and that's what we're kind of going to use today for our demo. Much of the things that we'll talk about today, we do kind of work on a universal concept. If you don't have Retrotec, the same kind of process still works, and the gauge that they have will work on any equipment that you may have. So those are the basic parts. The reason that I actually reached out to Retrotec is I thought that they just had a phenomenal, superior product in terms of the details that went into it, and custom cases, and always improving their products. And every couple of years, they actually almost come out with a new version to keep up with the industry. And any accessory you need is included. I really was impressed by their quality and what they were doing, and that's why I kind of reached out to want to work with them. These are all the things you get with your system. It's custom case. You get some the duct mask. You get all the tubing. All of their connections are color coded, and they're all connected into one unit they call the umbilical. So when you make all your connections, a lot of it's automatic. And they didn't try to, as they refer to as, dummy it down, but actually try to make it resistance for error. So your goal is that if you've been setting it up every day for a year, it's a no-brainer. But if you have employees or somebody that's doing this for the first time, your goal is to prevent the errors and make their transition into this kind of testing a much easier solution. And they do. The DM32 controls also Minneapolis fans. So if you actually have Minneapolis equipment and you're just trying to learn about the process, or you're debating about what to do now, or if you're going to upgrade, the new gauge, it's the DM32 Smart Gauge, will actually control your Minneapolis either blower door or duct tester. In the image, I have a blower door, but their new Smart Gauge is smart enough that it helps you with your calculations and also helps you with your whatever kind of fan you may have. This is brand new for Retrotec, and we feel we're going to be changing how the industry can work. So they offer a national manufacturer certification. What that means is that you can go online. You get a free certification for each unit that you buy. So if you buy a duct tester, you get a national manufacturer certification course that you can do online. They take about an hour and a half or so, maybe less, maybe a little longer if you really want to repeat some of the modules that are in there. And when you're done, you actually have a certification that's considered a national recognized certification. Many times this will actually be the type of certification that your building official will accept as being qualified to know how to use the equipment and perform the code tests, because that's kind of what it focuses on, is the fundamentals of how to do a total leakage test. There's also for blower doors, and there'll be one for the gauge coming out soon. But you can also, if you have multiple employees, or if you want to get this by itself, it also can be purchased from Retrotec. I'm going to dig into some of the units that we work with when we're actually testing the ducts itself. All right, so I'll go through the code and some other stuff, but I thought I'd at least bring up the many people that are out there that maybe contractors are used to dealing with or working with inches of water column. It's a common unit that's out there for that industry. Our industry, the industry that does the testing, or I kind of describe it as the energy efficiency side, it deals more with pascals. It's a much smaller fraction of an inch of water column, and that's how we do our testing. The most common question I get is, we test ducts at 25 pascals, and people say, well, why? And it's just become an industry standard for such a long time that's just the standard that everybody uses to test ducts. So duct testing is done at 25 Pascal. It's basically a difference between the pressure inside the ducts and outside the ducts. So a blower door is done at 50 pascals, for those of you that are wondering or how that test might be done. Our focus today is actually to focus on the total leakage duct testing. So if you really want to find out what is all this pressure mean in terms of a simple exercise, next time you have a drink and you grab a straw, you can put a little 1-inch mark on it and see how easy it is, almost difficult it is to even try and keep a little bit of water between that 1 inch. So that's 1 inch of water column. And a Pascal, it has 248 pascals in 1 inch of water column. So if you're looking at 25 pascals, you're looking at around 10%. So if you probably put a big marker line on that, that's probably about the amount of water you'd want to move up and down that. And you can see how difficult it is. I describe a Pascal as kind of like the how much is a Post-it note, the pressure on your hand. Maybe it's when your lips are closed and you just kind of pull them apart. It's a tiny fraction. But when you do a test, you actually feel as though there's a lot of air kind of moving through the system. I put this slide in to try and describe why duct testing is such a valuable thing to do, not just for the leakage or the energy or other issues, but this is some of the impacts that actually happen from duct testing, from duct leakage. So this is supply leakage. And in our industry, we refer to this as supply leaks suck. And the reason we say that is not just because they're not good to have, but they actually suck on the envelope itself and they bring extra air in. So this is supply leakage. And if you look at the arrows that I have, each arrow is like a unit. So if I'm having 2 units move through, I have to have 2 units come back to the return. So as you can see on the upper top here where I actually have some supply leakage, that means that it's not going to be brought into the house, but my return in my fan's always going to try to move the same amount of air. And so it'll actually bring air in from wherever it can. So clearly it's going to try and find extra air from outside. So supply leakage is really pulling air in from the outside of the envelope. One of the ways this can actually impact is if you have combustion appliances like the hot water tank. That vent that's on top of it goes straight outside, and that's an easy path for suddenly combustion air, CO, to actually come back into the house. So that's why your duct leakage has a much larger impact upon the whole house as a system. Obviously, the same is the opposite is the same for return leakage. You actually create a slight positive effect on the house, which if you're going to have one or the other, that would probably be the one to have. But in general, our goal is to reduce the leakage so it actually is not impacting the envelope in any way. So let's dig into the code real quick. These are the testing options that Louisiana has adopted. You basically follow the same IECC International Conservation Code compliance that other places have that. You, like many other states, adopt your own state requirements. So this is designed for if you're going to do a test at the rough end. So that's before the house is completed. There's no drywall or variety of other issues. And one of the options is, well, without an air handler. And I kind of removed that because usually that's not always much of a reality. In fact, if it's your construction is like most that I see, one of the first things to go in is the air handler up in the attic because it's a hard thing to get up there. So with the rough end, we have 6 CFM per 100 square foot is our compliance. If we're going to do the test later for post-construction, there are 2 options. One is leakaged outdoors and the total leakage. I'm not going to focus much on leakaged outdoors. Our goal is to stay with the fundamentals, which are all kind of total leakage tests. And in fact, I'm going to highly promote the total leakage at post-construction because the best thing that can happen is when your occupants, when people that are buying the house, they finally get in. If the test is done at the end, then we know that the duct system is compliant and it's working. And if you also see the number, I actually have almost twice as much potential leakage when I'm done than if I did when it was a rough end. So it gives you a little more leeway. I do recommend for people to consider testing it when they install it to just make sure they know how well they're doing, so it's easier to repair or correct any kind of leakage. But in general, the best time to do the test is just before people take occupancy. There's a variety of other third-party tests that require it to be done right before people move in for sure.
Joe, we've got a question real quick, just a general overhead one. It's coming up here on the chat board in the background, but people are wondering if it has to be who has to do these tests. Does it have to be a third party? Can the contractor run it themselves? Can you talk to that really quick? Because I know there's a quick answer for that.
The code that I saw, and Rick is on here also, and I'm sure Rick will be throwing in some information on the webinar. It says here CF2R is a contractor. My understanding was that it was supposed to be a third party who also had a nationally recognized certification. So if there's any other comments or details, please keep throwing those out in the question. Daniel, I appreciate your feedback. So we'll keep adding those to the response.
And do we know if there's been any differentiations or differences between municipalities as we've seen in some of the other states?
Not to my understanding is Louisiana has its own code that was adopted usually by the legislature. I'm sure that's how this one went through. So contractor can check his own. Rick's got some information he's got coming in on our chat board also. So the whether you can check your own is the most common question that shows up. And I'll let Rick confirm that. I don't want to give any misinformation about that. So a lot of times they allow that because, to be blunt, it allows people to accept the code when you actually can check your own work. So the goal here is that HVAC contractor can install his own system and then check it. And I think that actually is a very good system. I do think that a third party checks and balances is great, but when a state is going to a code, the best thing you can do is get everybody to work with it, accept it, have numbers that are reasonable to reach. And Louisiana has done a great job at that. The numbers that I see for leakage, total leakage, are actually very achievable for most people that have been doing any kind of HVAC work. And the fact that you can test your own work, which I have a confirmation of, then it allows you to be able to be your own contractor and checks and balance. So that's really a great thing that Louisiana has done. So if you do have let me go back, a multiple system in a house, then you would divide the square footage or separate the square footage per each air handler. So if I had two air handlers or two systems, then I would be separating the square footage that they serve and then trying to test each one of those and compare it to the square footage that it actually serves. So that's how I can find out if I had. Sometimes you may have the larger houses that may have three systems or with more than one. You need to make sure you're separating the square footage that it serves. So I highly recommend you get the quick guide from Retrotec. You can go to their website and you go to support and quick guides. Some of the stuff I'll have in here, this is actually only the 4-page quick guide, and it kind of guides you through a lot of stuff we'll be talking about. And I want to go through some basic information about how that works. What I'll try and do now is try and focus on just kind of the tests in general, and then we'll focus on some of the logistics that Louisiana has in terms of its requirements for contractors or some of their specific testing methods that people have questions about. So we want to prepare the ducts in the house and make sure everything's ready to do the test. A lot of this seems common sense for most contractors or contractors in general. I do want to make sure that I have removed any filters. I turned off the HVAC system, any other things that move air that may be impacting any kind of pressure flows, dryers, anything that actually could cause pressures to actually somehow affect the duct system, even though they're not connected to it. The other thing you want to make sure you've done is you open an exterior window or door. Some people now are doing sealed attics, and if it's a sealed attic, the hatch should be opened up. You want to make sure your duct system has access to the outside or is open to the outside, so it actually has the ability to flow air through that. If you have an air handler that's in the garage, you should actually open the garage slightly so it also is exposed to the outside. We'll go through the gauge in general, but we're going to usually start with a The range or the plug that's called 74. It's actually what fits right into the front of the unit itself. And we set that up on the gauge. A lot of the stuff that happens on the smart gauge is automatic, and we'll come back to the gauge in general, but I thought I'd just go through a few basic setups that we have. The ranges are the little plugs that fit on the front of the fan, and they actually determine how much flow moves through the fan so that the gauge can calculate your results. Obviously, the more air that moves through the unit, the more air is also moving through the ducts or leaking in the ducts. So the tighter the range or ring that you have, then the tighter the system is. One of the questions, I was in Florida doing some training just last week, and the most common question I had was why is it that I need to keep changing the rings or the plugs to get the results depending on what kind of system we had. So if I set up my system and I realize that I have gotten to my test pressure of 25 Pascal, but I don't have any readings or any answers here on the second row of my gauge, that I can actually change the ring, and I still didn't get actually a result. So it still needed to come a little smaller, which is a good thing. The smaller the opening is, it means the tighter the duct system is. So when I went down to a smaller flange, or sorry, a plug for the ring, and I went down to the number 47, I actually got a reading, and I can actually determine right there whether or not I'd passed my code. And just to show you that even if you went a smaller, maybe it doesn't give you the result you need. So we're going to adjust the amount of flow that moves through the fan in order to make sure we're getting the right result on our gauge. So it's kind of a basic overview of how the fan reads the pressure inside in order to give us the results.
Hey Joe, common mistake too that was noted on that slide was that sometimes people will change the plug or the range and forget to change on the DM32 smart gauge.
That may have happened. There are two different ways to use the unit to test. One of which is to use the smart gauge by itself and actually do set pressure and run. We kind of use that as the thing that most people get used to. But one of the things that is great about the Retrotec system is that it actually has a speed control knob on the side. So that allows you to actually run the test with the fan itself and let the gauge read your results. So that's one option for you. So if there's some reason your connection's not working or other challenges, you always have two options to run your test. So in general, you would actually have the front of the gauge, and it's as simple as hitting set pressure, 2.5, and set, and basically you're up and running. There is a at symbol or at feature in the upper left corner. What this allows your gauge to do is, say, for instance, you're testing a system. Many of you will be doing new homes because we're focused on code here, but you'll find that this actually is a major marketing tool for your existing business for doing existing homes. So if you go do a system that I cannot reach pressure of 25 Pascal to test it because it's just so leaky, even with all of the ranges as wide open as they can be, the gauge is smart enough to help calculate what it would be at 25. So right here, I actually am only reaching 23 Pascals, but I use the add feature to help me determine what the CFM would be at 25 Pascals. So there's a lot of great features. It is impossible to learn everything that you would need to know about doing a test or using this equipment in our 1 hour webinar, but my goal is to kind of give you an overview about some of these things. I feel they actually help you with a simple memory when you're going to go back and do a variety of stuff when you do learn it, either online or at some of the live demos we'll be doing. This is the one that's going to kind of walk you through the basic setup and how it actually kind of looks kind of as a grid or on an illustration. So we have our duct system air handlers in the middle. The return is the one that's coming down towards the into the interior space. So I've got 4 takeoffs, and so the objective is we're going to do a total leakage test. We highly recommend you do a depressurization test. That actually is going to pull air out of your system, and when you seal all of the registers, it makes a nice tight seal and keeps it there when I do my test. So we're going to seal all of the registers, all right? and any other supplies. Like if I have a system that had um, uh, all the supplies are additional return. Sometimes there may be a small return in the master bedroom or something. So I usually don't want to use that to test with. I want to use the largest return in the house. But I do want to make sure the entire system is basically closed off and sealed and separated, so that when I pressurize or depressurize, I now control the pressures that's inside of the unit. All right, so I have the all of the registers sealed off. I'm now going to add the flange and connect that to the main return. You also may, if you have houses that have individual returns in each of the rooms, some people are still doing that. In Georgia, they still actually do that. Then at that point, you need to actually seal everything off and go to the air handler and connect your duct system, your duct tester, actually to the air handler to perform your test. So we'll stick with that it's connected to the main return, probably in the hallway. It could be the ceiling. That's kind of the concept that we're trying to illustrate here. So everything's sealed off. Now I can add the flex duct that goes to the tester itself, right? So the rings or the plugs we talked about are actually inside of the flex duct, because we're actually going to pull air. We're going to depressurize, so we're pulling air out of it, and all of the air actually moves through the area where we actually have our rings and our plugs. All right, so I'm going to add a blue tube into the system itself. This tube is going to connect to the manometer, and this is how I actually can determine that I've established a pressure between outside of the ducts and inside, because I need some kind of tubing inside as what I'm comparing the pressure to. So I get my gauge. I'm going to connect the blue tube. Notice that everything is now color coded, and it's a lot easier to connect. So the blue is going to the duct system, and the red is left open. That's actually the reference to the inside of the house. I connect the green and the blue to the duct tester. They have colored ports right on its side. And I also connect the speed control cable to the unit itself. A lot of this is all spelled out real quick and simple in the guide, and gets you up and running fairly fast. Yeah.
So Joe, if just to make this a little bit more clear, so since you're depressurizing, if you start the test the way that it's set up and you're not getting results, and you know that you have to switch to a smaller plug or a smaller ring, then you have to actually take the flange off and then change that and then put the flange back on. Is that the way that it works?
No, you actually just take off the flex duct itself.
Off the flex duct, okay, and then change it in there. But just to be clear, you know you're doing it right if you're running a depressurization test if the plugs are actually inside of the flex duct.
That's right.
Okay.
And you can actually feel that you're pulling air out of it. So when you see the fan itself, the duct tester, one side's wide open all the time, and the other side has a red ring, and it gets only smaller and smaller and smaller as you change out individual plugs. So I depressurize to 25 pascals, and on the gauge, I just have to hit set pressure 25. And it knows what I'm doing. It knows that you're actually depressurizing. That's why we have a yellow and a green tube. It can tell which way the pressure is working and what it's doing for us automatically. And it gives us our results. Our results are 340 CFM. And I can now use that to calculate whether or not this house passed code or not. Now, if I wanted to pressurize, some people just feel that's the way they want to do. It can actually loosen the duct seal that you actually have on the registers. And sometimes it can loosen it and you're not even aware of it. So your leakage could be slightly higher if you pressurize versus depressurization. So in order to go the opposite way, if you want to pressurize, it's a matter of just turning the fan around. All of the connections stay the same. You don't have to change any tubing. There's nothing to add. It's just merely pull the fan out, flip it around, and you're good to go. So as you can see in the illustration on depressurization, the red section where all of the rings go is on the left, is actually hidden inside of the flex duct itself. So if I go back to
go
ahead.
Sorry, Joe. I just wanted to reiterate. So you are saying that the only difference for a setup of a pressurization test as opposed to a depressurization test is just which way the fan points.
That's right.
Okay.
So here's our illustration I had earlier, and I now just pulled the duct tester out, and we'll flip it around. So now you can clearly see the front. We kind of refer to as kind of the front. That's where the range and the plugs go. Now that's very accessible. And then when I hit set pressure go, now I'm actually pushing air into the system and pressurizing it to find all of my leakage. Are there any questions so far? My question window is fairly small. So if you guys have any questions about this or testing or anything like that, please go ahead and throw those up. Now, this one, I usually when I do a live testing, I usually kind of do this as a quiz or seeing how people are doing. So there's no testing required if the ducts and the air handler are in conditioned space. Right. So this is one reason to try to work with your contractor sometimes and or design professionals about bringing your ducts back into the envelope. I describe as many of the homes we grew up in, the hallway was dropped down. The hallway was always a lower ceiling because that's where they ran their main trunk line and fed off into the bedrooms on the sides. And that would be a great solution if they had drywall on the other side of the duct system. If they'd actually had kept that into the conditioned area, even though it's going to get closed off again below it, it would not have been exposed to the actual attic conditions. So a lot of builders and HVAC contractors are realizing that you can do a great system that doesn't impact the interior design features that everybody wants to have, and actually do this and do this well. So it's one way to not really avoid testing, but makes your whole system work much more efficiently, because when the ducts are in conditioned space, they're not exposed to the extreme temperature and humidity that you actually have in some of the places where they're not in conditioned space. So it's a win-win for a variety of people, especially the homeowners. I'll touch quickly on some software that we have that you can use to do some of the testing. All this stuff can be downloaded from at retrotec.com. That there's this is for a PC. It's called Virtual Gauge. You can download Virtual Gauge and practice exactly what it would do for you on your PC even before you buy a gauge. So you can learn a lot about how it works and what it does. You can connect it with a USB when you actually have your gauge or Wi-Fi and run it remotely. But it's a great learning tool if you have several employees that you can actually download this and they can actually practice, get used to the different screens and how to set stuff up on your PC itself. They also have everybody's got an app now. Of course, Retrotec has an app on Android or Apple, and you can use this if you have a Wi-Fi gauge to control your gauge and run it remotely also. So this kind of stuff is really kind of where the industry is headed in terms of the next step on what you want to do once you are using your equipment regularly. One of the best places that this plays into the industry we're talking about today is, so I have my duct tester, and the duct tester is usually in the downstairs, and I have somebody upstairs trying to find a leak, or some people do existing homes and they'll do seal on the fly. So they turn the system on, they find some leaks, they seal them, try and find some more leaks, and in the process they can actually turn on and off the duct tester while they're in the attic using their phone or a tablet or something similar. But most people have their phone on their side, and you can use the app to actually control the duct tester, really kind of from almost any part of the house. But in general, it's a great place to not have to come back down the ladder or crawl back up. Again, you guys have crawl spaces, but that's one of the focuses that some people have is how to control things remotely. The other thing that's coming out, I have some other slides that go through how to use the gauge itself, but these are some of the things that are coming your way for the industry. And if you have code officials, these are the kind of things that make a difference, and why the DM32 Smart Gauge is going to make a difference for how people not just test, but how they also are able to keep track of their results and communicate with others. It'll basically be designed as a 3G kind of tablet, and it'll do automatic testing. So you can actually see, you can select an IECC type of tests. So it's what it means is you just follow the basic criteria. That's what we kind of overviewed or covered, and it'll run the test automatically. It'll actually connect to your gauge, and when you're done, it actually puts your results up on a map that you can share. And I have results that I can send an email report to somebody. So I can actually do the test in the house automatically by just making the connections, saying, okay, I have the gauge, I have my fan set up, I hit go. And when I'm done, I can email the report to a building official. And it actually did a geotag right where I'm standing, showed me exactly what the criteria was for the test, and that it passed the criteria that I'd actually had set up for it. So in terms of making sure that you have a strong testing process, and you actually confirm your results, I think will be something that really brings validity to our industry. And the fact you can send an email and have somebody see the results before you leave the job will be a godsend for a lot of building officials that really don't want to have to go to the job site and can confirm, yes, you did comply, and before you leave, do something else, or you're good to go. So I think it's really going to help us be much more successful in the field. Andrew commented, there's no tests for foam house for duct tester and total leakage. I think what he's saying is if your duct system is in a attic that has a using foam as the attic, which actually means that your the envelope didn't end at the ceiling; it actually went up to the attic. So as long as your attic is in considered conditioned or semi-conditioned space, then you actually do not have to do that test. So as long as your attic is not vented, I guess is the way to do that. Would be one way to confirm that you would or would not have to test. Which test? So to me, it would just be the duct test itself. So that's what you're after, is whether or not you. I'm following up on Andrew's question about if I have a foamed attic, or my attic is basically a sealed attic, is the concept that you described. That means my duct system is actually in the conditioned space itself. Hopefully that answered the questions. Are there other questions that's similar? So there's the dates that I'll be out in Louisiana. I had some slides that did not seem to have popped in about how to do the test. I don't know if they ended up in a different slide deck or not. So let me see if I can find those. Are there any other questions about how the? Oh, there they are. I think we kind of covered it actually. So it basically was about how to do a set pressure and go. So one of the things that I've found when I work with a variety of either states, contractors, building officials, is that this seems like it's something that's really complicated or really challenging or overwhelming. And once you see it go up and how simple it is to perform a test, you realize there's much more complicated things that we do to install a HVAC system than trying to actually do a duct test itself. So trying to do your line set and confirm your all of your pressures and temperatures when you're done. Some of the new thermostats that are out there today are one of the most complicated parts of the system. Some people have to be certified and need a PC in order to set up a thermostat. So I think our industry is really pushing the limits, which is a great thing for everybody. It puts us all on a higher level. And now actually when you test your system, you're actually confirming what it is that you actually do as a professional that stands out from other people or other states that aren't doing that. So I think it's a great thing to add to your process that you do. Are there other questions about things that can or cannot be done, or make sure we're covering some of those? So I got a couple questions about, okay, so how much does it cost and those kind of things. So my goal, and one of the reasons that Rick reached out to us just so we can make sure that we provided some local connections. So I don't know if you're like me, I like to just go over and drive somewhere, see one, pick it up, and drive back home. So Colburn sells those. I do training, so I don't actually kind of keep track of the cost. So I highly recommend you reach out to your distributor and see what they have in terms of their cost. And I get it. A ballpark is you're below $2,000. I think that's the only number I probably could throw out that's safe. So, and Retrotec also is a place where you can actually go for your quotes if you don't have anybody local that actually distributes them. Yes, here's a great question from Mark. He asks, somebody quoted at 1995. I'm not sure who. Daniel says around 1995. So Mark asked a question of any recommendations on speeding up the duct test. It's extremely slow on sealing all the diffusers. All right. Rick's got 2275. Sorry, I guess around $2,000. So 2275 is Rick's price. So as anything you could buy, you'll find that there are always some slight changes or variances. So Rick's does not include any type of shipping or handling or anything like that. So that's what his price. And I think being able to go in somewhere and pick it up. So sorry, back to the question. I'm reading some of the other questions here. One of the best ways you can actually speed up the process is with a couple of other secondary devices that are out there. I don't have slides of them, but there are one's called Vent Cap Solutions. And you can find them online at ventcapsolutions.com. And what he sells is actually a little box that goes over these registers, right? So it can be, usually it's kind of looks like a black cake pan. And his system allows you to connect it with just a pole and hook it onto the register itself and go on to the next one. So you don't really need a ladder to do that. And it does go fairly quick. There's also systems that are made by Sierra Building Science, Russ King out of California. And he has a really nice, it's like a plywood with gasket that uses a pole that goes all the way to the ground, right? So you've seen those kind of zip poles that do that. So they both have their best features among them, one of which is it doesn't pull on the register, but does have a pole that goes to the ground. The other one, I can just hook it and go on to the next one. I do tell you that you usually will need some type of tape, and the other addition can actually make your process go much faster. All right, so now we have a lot of questions flying in real quick. So let's see what some of the other ones are. Hopefully that answered your question. Can you talk about the drag and puffer to help speed up the process? One of the challenges is to find out where are the leaks. So if you have a system that's leaking, or sometimes you'd be testing somebody else's system and you want to find out what's going on. At that point, I prefer to do pressurization because I can go around and feel the leaks and find them. So the puffer can do it. I'll be honest, your hand will feel most of the leaks in general. If you want to do a quick check, I highly recommend you do it before you insulate your ducts, if you want to just find out where you're at. If you're new to doing this, the best thing I would recommend is first couple installs, I would just do a fin check to see where you're at before you insulate. And then you actually know that, hey, we're doing really well. The Dragon Puffer does not come with the unit. It's a secondary accessory. So that does actually help try and find some of the leaks. And it actually can help find the leaks that are around the register. One of the most common leaks is right here at the boot, at the drywall, at the register. If there's any advice I could give you that I've gotten from every other state is that this must be sealed. This may be in your code that it's required, but it's not in other states, and they learned the hard way that if you are not sealing it with literally some kind of caulk or adhesive thing that actually seals the register to the drywall, to the actual boot, and all of this gets sealed, that's the highest probability of failure for many actual contractors. It also can be a source of failure for a blower door test when that comes around later in your code. So, but in general, I highly recommend you seal the section where the drywall is touching your register and vents or in the boot. Rick says, yes, that is in the code. You must seal that. It can be cheaper to use a regular fog machine, Daniel. My feeling is that you're going to find that most of everybody who's doing this is going to pass. 12 CFM per 100 square feet is actually a fairly achievable number as a thing to learn through. So I'm going to pause out of this and bring up something real quick. So library, Louisiana.
Joe, while you're switching over there, would you like me to show this slide for the alternatives for ceiling registers for vent
Oh
caps
yeah,
and duct block?
if you have that, sure.
I do. Let's see here. So this is it. If everybody can see that. Everybody see that okay?
Yeah, I got it. I can see it.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this is what Joe was talking about. Here you have a vent cap system, and you can see that it's got sort of a black plastic. He uses all recycled materials, great product, and essentially what he does here is just sort of fix it to the vent using this pole. You don't have to use that pole if you can actually reach the vent. And here on the right side is duct block. He uses a wood pole. This one, he actually uses sort of what would you call that? A splint or a lean-to, or Joe, what's the terminology we'd use for that? But
Those are it's actually a system that goes along with that.
sure, but it's part of the system. So
Yeah.
essentially, the point is that you can reuse these. And then we had a question, Joe, and I didn't answer it. From boy, that's a great name, Theron, I think his name is, Mr. Gautreau, and he just wanted to know about, well, what do you do if you don't have grills already hung? So what if you're what if you're doing a rough end test? How do you cover up those the terminations of those duct runs? And Joe, I recommended to him something I think that you taught me, is that a lot of guys who are doing new builds will actually cut pieces, rectangular pieces of foam, whether they're using old insulation or old coolers or whatever, and they'll actually just use those, stick those right in, and run the test. And then when they're done, they'll pull them out and put them in a contractor bag, and they just bring them around. They maybe make 20 or 30 of them, and they'll actually carry them from job to job, right?
Yeah, you can go to some Walmart still actually sell a variety of products like that, but most of the fabrics places can do that. You can also get them online. Basically, it's just a chunk of foam, and a lot of people actually use the same type of register or boot for many of their jobs. So then they're able to keep that as a consistent install. I think I lost my. Oh, there it is. Okay. Do you want to connect me back, Jay?
Should have control, Joe.
Oh, wrong one. Oh, you got it. Yeah. Daniel says, I got some other questions. So Daniel says, 4 out of 10 tests fail, and he's in California. And Daniel, I can tell you, you actually have a much more restrictive requirement in order to pass duct tests in general. So 12, as the IECC has, is actually something that's very achievable, as I described, for many contractors that are new to doing duct testing. The Where the code is headed is towards 4 and even 3. So that actually is a significant change. And knowing your air handler leaks potentially 2, you only get 1 for your whole system. So
Right.
12 is actually not too tough.
Sure. And what Joe's talking about, just for everybody, when he's the numbers that he's mentioning are CFMs, or cubic feet per minute, per 100 square feet of square of floor area, just like the slide that he's showing. So those are achievable. And I will mention, Joe, that we are talking about total duct leakage here, right?
That's right.
So just so everybody knows, that duct leakage is not necessarily coming from ducts that are outside the thermal boundaries, something that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier when we were talking about foam. Here I'm over here in Chicago, and we have a lot of systems where where some of our ductwork is inside and some of our ductwork is outside, and we find frequently that some of that leakage that we're finding is actually coming from the system inside. In fact, much of it's at the plenum or around the box itself. And Joe, do you find that to be the case as well?
I can't. Yeah, indeed, right.
Yeah, just say yes.
So some other questions I have here is it cheaper to use a regular fog machine? There is a 1000 that's out there, Roscoe 1000, that's actually fairly small and works well. I can tell you, once you go to the next level, you may need to do that. But in general, I feel you'll find that if you installed it well, you have good, solid connections. You're either using mastic or the 181 tape, or whatever it is that's the one detail I wasn't sure about. Maybe Rick can chime in. But if you're using anything to seal the connections, if you have any kind of elbows, that those are all well sealed. All of those connections are massive leaks. And if you seal around the registers at the drywall, you have a high probability of passing well below 12. You probably should be getting closer to 8 or even 6 with your numbers. And the other one is, how do you create a compliance certificate? I don't know if maybe Rick can chime in if there's one that's available for the state to fill out. If not, we're trying to create one that would work well for you. And Rick did chime in that UL 181 is fine, and use it with a lot of mastic. It depends on what you're sealing. If I'm sealing a 90-degree elbow, the mastic usually will work a lot quicker and cheaper than the tape. But there's other parts that I'll do that actually would use the tape and be much more faster system. So he asked, what do I use to seal around the registers, meaning the drywall? So I don't know what kind of boot you guys may have or what's being installed. Many now, they actually have a nice flange that allows you to connect easily with the drywall for secure. And there's different different manufacturers, different types of hot sauces is kind of how I describe it. But your goal is to make sure that where it goes from drywall up to the boot and into the attic is sealed. One way or the other. Mastic is an easy solution depending on what type of boot you have, or you can actually work with there's different foams or forms to go along with it. So that's just one of the details that I know you definitely want to make sure you're on top of. So there are a couple different markets that are creating some forms, and this is from Rick, trying to get some kind of consistency. So that's definitely one of the goals that's out there. Daniel says he's seen a lot of systems that leak incredibly. And I think that when in California, they're not allowed to test their own work. They actually have to have somebody else as a third party check their work. So I think when you do test your own work, it actually gives you the ability to confirm or see some of your problems quickly in the process. So I think that does actually benefit. I do have a slide up here that I want to show you that I thought I had in my deck, and it shows the leakage and how it actually gets based on floor area. Some people describe it as a percentage, because when you're dealing with something per 100, it's easy to convert it into almost a percentage. So if I had I was going to I know what I was going to try and change that. So this is actually a leakage outside, but either way, my goal is that I actually have a CFM leakage, which is the 107 right there in the middle of the numbers in the slide. 2400 is the square footage that I have. And when I actually take my calendar and do 107 divided by 2400, which sounds kind of strange, it always should give you a decimal and some numbers. If you end up with a whole number, then you basically did it backwards. So I ended up with 0.04458, and I can round that up and times it by 100, and that gives me either 4.5 CFM per 100 square feet or 4.5% of a leakage. So usually it's easier to say I have 4.5% versus 4.5 for 100 square feet of floor area. So that's the math that's done behind it, and it's easily done in the gauge itself. I can actually select results that do that. So my goal was to stay basic and simple today, but one of the things about the smart gauge is it actually will provide those results directly in the gauge.
So, Joe, did you get Rob's question about? He said, "Is this for new construction only, or for retrofit systems as well?"
Again, there's always some details that every state adopts. So I know for it's a new construction process, I'll make a statement and Rick can confirm that usually when there's a change out, which means they're changing out a system and it requires a permit, or they're changing out a significant amount of duct system, which should also require a permit, then once you get a permit, usually you're required to then comply with the code itself. So Rick will probably confirm or deny that as it goes. So I'll talk about something that's a little different as we kind of wind up here. Um, this is a code compliant concept. This is something that's kind of new. I can tell you that other parts of the country, many HVAC contractors, like in Florida, do not have to do a code compliance test, but yet they're buying up duct testers because they use them in their existing market. So when they go to a house that may have concerns, comfort problems, they realize this tool actually quantifies the issues that they have, and you can explain to a homeowner your system is leaking 25%, which means that 25% of your bill is not getting inside to your house. So that's actually been a major benefit for existing service calls, as well as if you're going to change out a unit. It really is important to know how leaky the duct system is so that you don't end up just swapping out 3-ton for another 3-ton, only to find out that actually the duct leakage was just as much of a problem and either should have been replaced or definitely well sealed. So that way you don't install a new system only to find out that you're coming back within a month to now actually find out why they have leaks. What are the average costs for running this test? Ben asks. The only real cost that you end up with, Ben, is that you end up using the duct mask, and or you invest in one of the systems that's out there from VentCap Solutions or Sierra Building Science. So those can run anywhere from $300 to $500-$600 sometimes, but you'll find out that the time savings is pretty remarkable. But other than that, there's not a reoccurring replacement fee or anything that's a part of the manufacturer products themselves, except the what you do to actually seal the ducts.
So, Joe, there seems to be a lot of talk on the board here about what contractors are charging to clients. Um, and my statement has been, it really does. It's a big difference across the country. It depends on and between houses. But do you want to speak to that at all? Because it still seems like it's a very hot topic. What does the test cost the client?
Now, so that is a loaded question. That would be like saying, does this dress make me look fat? I would just say it. I think that
It
whatever
makes you
you're,
look bald, that's for sure.
yeah, it sure does. It looks. So I would not want to chime in on that. I think that what happens that other states have done is that there's a business model that everybody wants to try and figure out or learn on a curve. So if there's very few people in the area that are doing the tests, obviously you have a large market share and have the ability to charge a variety of stuff. So some people charge per system, some people charge depends on when you're going to do it. So I think that there is actually a value that actually the market creates itself. Of course, everybody wants to get as much as they can and realize that after the whole thing kind of settles down, that there is a common price. Great, excellent. So Audrey asked, how about calibration on the gauge? The DM32 Smart Gauge calibration lasts for 5 years, and in the quick guide, it shows you how to do a self check with the gauge. so you kind of can confirm that your gauge is working correctly, and that actually use part of your quality assurance and quality control process. And so it's every 5 years to send that back in. We don't know the cost actually because they haven't really established what that price would be. I'm sure it'll be several $100s to do that, but we think it may even go longer than 5 years. We're not sure yet. So several people ask, how long does it take to perform this test from start to finish? All right, I've gotten some answers from other people that says it takes about an hour to an hour and a half. I can tell you it depends on how high the ceilings are, number one, or if you're using a secondary uh, thing to cover the duct systems. If I go into an average house, let's call the average house 2,000 square feet. We'll just say that it's 2 floors for the sake of adding the issue with going up and down the stairs. It's one system. Let's say it has 15 takeoffs and 2 returns. That I would anticipate spending an hour on that job while it's on the job. When you get better at this, and you could easily pull that off in 45 minutes, the faster you are with sealing the system, the better you are. You will find that there's a lot of options about pulling the duct mask off of the ceiling without having to grab a ladder. A lot of the times, depending on how you leave a little tab there. One of the things that people use for the duct mask itself is a little piece of PVC tubing with some kind of like the same kind of clip you use on a briefcase, where it's got little clips on the edge, and you can strap that around your neck and hold your duct mask as you're on the ladder. All those little tricks and trades are out there. There is a wealth of information on YouTube for some of this. Daniel says, yeah, he laughed out loud. He goes, it takes about an hour. He's out in California doing this regularly. So he says it takes about an hour at the most. And as anything, as you do it the first couple times, you're like, wow, this is, seems time consuming or frustrating. But by the end, you're like, it's a simple routine and it goes quick. One person doing it can be, feels tedious. 2 people make it go usually less than half the time, based on how well they're able to be efficient with taking stuff up and down real quick.
So for new construction, it's usually pretty straightforward too. But if we're doing, I know that right now we're not talking about residential retrofits, but that's when you start running into, it can take you longer because of people's stuff in the way, furniture underneath the ducts, a homeowner who has tons and tons of questions. But I think that, I don't know if that helps, but yeah, hopefully that helps everybody. I'm sure that many of you as contractors have run into the same type of thing, no matter what test you're running or what job you're doing. Sorry.
So the goal that Rick wanted me to try and do is just kind of give a basic overview of the code, and kind of just demystifying what a duct tester was, and that it's really not a complicated process to do. I can tell you that your quality control will improve drastically, and you'll find that most people that figure it out quickly are ready for the next code, even when it comes into play, because they've already doing this kind of process. We will be having several additional trainings later this year. Rick thought that we kind of give it another maybe a month and a half into February or March, and do a much more in-depth webinar series about how to get better at it, how to do it, so what are some of the tricks, and share that. All of the questions that you guys threw out at us, we have those on a spreadsheet. So Jay, I, and Rick are all going to kind of go through those and try and come up with some answers, and we'll send those out in the response with the slides that we have as a PDF. Some people are commenting about when to do the test. So if you're going to do a Roger asked when this be on YouTube. Usually today's Friday. It'll probably show up late next week. The guy who does some of that stuff is on vacation, so we'll get it out there as soon as we can. One of the challenges about doing the test when it is a rough-in is that later there are issues that happen, and then you end up having to come back when the homeowner realizes that there is no air coming out of their master bedroom supply. And you're like, well, that's frustrating because we did the tests when we installed the unit, everything was okay. But of course, when you installed the unit, everything was wide open, ready to go. And after that was more plumbers, more electricians, insulation in the attic, a variety of people stomping around up in the attic. And you'll find that that actually is where most of the issues happen. So I do think you'll find that the test is actually not that difficult to do, that sometimes you'll want to just check your work. We're good to go. And then later, if there is an issue, you confirm that it wasn't you that stepped on the duct. And now you actually have the ability to do the test in the end for final compliance. And if there is an issue, then you can actually discuss who actually should pay for the repair. I appreciate everybody who showed up today. Don't hesitate to throw your questions out at the end if there's something you want us to get back with you about. We really are excited about what you guys are doing. I have actually only been through Louisiana, never really was able to stay there for very long, so I will be out there in 2 weeks and excited about that. And if you want to get more about the schedule and when we're going to be there, don't hesitate to contact Rick or Retrotec. Any of the locations could have information. I'm trying to bring up the last slide. Rick, anything you want to add at the end here? So you want to chime in at all? Jay, is it you typing?
It is. Sorry about that. I had a question so there was just a question from Daniel, who's been very helpful. Daniel, your checks in the mail for sure. But he wanted to know about how he can actually get the online certification. I was typing that into him, but if you just go to www.retrotec.com, you're going to see on the homepage there's a link that goes directly to our certification, our national manufacturer certification for duct testing, for blower doors, and we do have 2 separate certifications for different types of duct testers depending on which ones you're actually running. And then there's a whole host of other certifications available there, so it's a fun time. So check it out.
Rick, do you have a mic? Rick, do you have a mic out there? Do you have, if I unmute?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
I do.
Excellent. The ways who can test in Louisiana? Louisiana rewrote the code to state that if you are certified, you can check your own ductwork. If you're not certified, you can check your own ductwork, but a building official has to be on site to confirm. Building officials are not very happy about that one, but it's written into the code. You'll probably get some grief in your metropolitan area if you decide to go that route. And the last one was if you are third party and certified, you can check it as well.
So you can check other contractors' work if you're certified, basically.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Anything else you want to add that we didn't touch on that I can elaborate for you?
I think the piece where it's the gauge itself will give you the CFM per 100 that the building officials are looking for, and when we pass through your areas, we'll show you that on the gauges, how easy it is, and how easy it will be for you just to go ahead and fill out the information for the building official. It's not going to have to be any complex math. It's already done for you on the gauge.
Yeah, one of the great things about the duct test is that the math is fairly easy to do. I didn't want to bog people down with trying to feel that the gauge was overwhelming with you took this whole thing in today. So I can assure you that it's very user friendly, and it's pretty stunning how they've actually tried to take something that with just a few buttons you actually get the exact results you needed. Somebody says certified by who, and I think that they allow a national certification. Can you elaborate on? Do you guys also do BPI and ResNet, Rick?
It was written in that it must be from a nationally recognized training organization, and so when I was asking the building officials what they're going to recognize if the Retrotec certification was going to be okay, I think right now the state of Louisiana is going to be very satisfied with anybody's certification, just to be able to get as many people certified so they don't run into the problems that they had in California and other places trying to get enough people certified to do the checks.
I think that's going to be a major bonus for a variety of stuff. So somebody asked, will instructors be at the New Orleans Frigidaire meeting? Jay, can you tell us when that is? No, not Jay Martin, actually, Jay Martin.
Oh, Jay Martin. Okay, sorry.
I will actually be at the Frigidaire meeting in New Orleans, so I will be able to talk to anybody about the subject if they're interested.
Somebody asked about where can they get BPI certification, and BPI.org has a map that can do that. If you're looking for a more advanced certification, I can tell you that there is a certification that is called the IDL, Infiltration and Duct Leakage Certification. I offer that, and there's a few other people offering that. We're probably going to try and get over to Louisiana and do that. It will not happen in 2 weeks. It'll probably happen more towards the end of February. But you can go online and try and find somebody if you need to do that sooner.
We at Cobrans are also working with ESCO directly to be able to bring duct leakage testing directly to our contractors and the market in Louisiana. So we've got that test written. The course is delivered, and I will be running around the state giving that certification as well.
So somebody asked about the DET certification. The DET is a duct and envelope test certification. It is also nationally recognized. I'm also a DET certifier or person who can do that. One of the things we're going to try and do when we go around for the live training is to give you the things that you obviously would not got on an online training, so that it will actually complete what the DET certification would do, and also what your IDL certification from BPI would do. Is basically the hands-on, oh, okay, I got it, and you can practice and do that. So our live trainings will actually be doing that. I cannot tell you for sure if I'll be doing a DET certification as part of that, only because it's usually around an 8-hour course to do that, because it also includes doing blower door and a variety of other parts of that. But as Rick pointed out, you can get the Retrotec online national certification. If you buy a system, it's included. If you want to get a second one, there's a reasonable fee to take the online course. And I'll be out there in 2 weeks to kind of give a hands-on live overview of what it is that you still have any questions about. Any other questions? Usually what we do is even kind of past that, but we say, okay, the webinar is actually concluded. We appreciate everybody's time. And then we actually kind of hang around for other questions that people kind of stumbled into or realized they wanted to ask. So I usually will do a stop recording, and we'll call it end of the day. The webinar is over. Thank you so much. But for those who want to stay and hear some of the other questions or hear some other comments, then we'll kind of keep that going and make that more of a discussion, even though part of it already was. So for those of you who are wondering if it's over and you need to go to do something, you're free to do that, and but don't hesitate to hang out with us. Thanks so much for everybody who did to come today, and I look forward to getting out there to meeting many of you and going to the Coburn locations and seeing what you guys are doing out there. I'm really excited for Louisiana. You guys are embracing the inevitable really well, so we're really impressed by everybody wanting to do this and do it well. That's been a challenge for other states. Many of them are like resistant or frustrated, but our goal is approximately to make you feel comfortable and realize that this is easy to do, and let's help you do it.
Okay, Joe, we did have a couple questions. It says that there was a question about the cost for the BPI certification. I mean, that's there's so many different certifications. I think you're talking about the IDL. Joe, I don't think that do you have to take an IDL training before you can take the IDL certification test, before you can sit for the test?
No, IDL was designed to just show up and take a test if you wanted to. There's training you can do, But IDL costs $200 directly to BPI to do the tests, plus the training center if they have any kind of test requirements or any kind of fees. So I work with a couple of the trainers that were trying to get out there to do some IDL training. So I don't know exactly when, but that's our goal to be able to provide that. So if I had to give you a ballpark quote, I know some people charge $600. I think we were trying to do something that was around half that or even less, depending on the process. So that test actually can be done in less than probably 20 minutes for certification if you were familiar with how to use the equipment.
And as far as our certification is concerned, the training is less than 2 hours. There is, I believe it's about a 25 question exam at the end, and if you pass that, you'll receive immediate certification from us. And the price, I think it ranges from $75 to something like $100 for anybody who hasn't bought a system. If you've bought a system, you get a free one. And if you are a trainer that works for a training organization, we usually will definitely work with you. I hope that helps.
So I asked about how to get the certification, and you can contact Jay. I'll send it out to everybody. Scott at Retrotec.com. He's the guy that does the coordination for that, and he can actually figure out how to direct you to the secondary person if that's the case. But he's kind of like the go-to person for that. So it's Scott at Retrotec.com. Somebody says, Rick, this is for you. As I understand, local cities to decide the adoption or rejection of Chapter 11 of this code. Any idea where to find out what each city decision may have been, or if they've changed anything? I'm not sure what Chapter 11 is. I'm sure that's familiar for you, Rick. Do you know anything about that, or can make a comment?
Yes, the state adopted Chapter 11. Now, enforcement is always going to be by municipality, what they're going to enforce, what they're not going to enforce. But the state has adopted the changes, and because of that, whether it's enforced by the code officials or not, responsibility is still, it needs to be taken care of.
So as most things are, this is what you have to do and should do, whether or not some areas that are, I live in Georgia and I've lived in Arizona and other places where rural areas can have challenges in terms of there's just not enough staff to do that sometimes. So it doesn't mean you're not supposed to do it. It means that maybe your building official is overwhelmed and can't get to you. So I also put something else out there that I used to be a home inspector, and many home inspectors now offer energy audits. Many home inspectors have duct testers and blower doors, and they also will soon be following up with, oh yes, I can do a duct test for you. And some homeowners are savvy that have moved from other locations and may request those things. So just because somebody did not check your work doesn't mean that you feel as though it's okay to get by with that, because it will not take long before somebody will test what you did and find that if you're not on your game, it will show up pretty quickly. Anything else that anybody wants to throw out or ask, or still feels challenged about, or other questions about the code that Rick can ask specifically, or we can ask about any kind of technical comments? So Rick, I'm assuming they would just contact the local Coburns in terms of trying to get registered for those events. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Get in touch with your local Coburn salesman, and we will get you guys set up in Lafayette, Baton Rouge, Harahan. I know that we're already making contact with Houma, Lake Charles, Shreveport, and Alexandria as well. So we will be moving around the state as we get moving a little bit more. So yeah, just direct your questions to your Coburn salesman, and we'll get the answers back to you.
And when we send out an email, we'll try and see what other updates we might have. So I told Rick, our training was at his disposal for that week for the most part. So Our goal is to get it to as many places as possible to make sure that we, to be blunt, I'm not trying to do any kind of sales thing, and I feel the same about the Rick. Rick feels as though if you're well trained, then you'll make decisions that you need to make. So our goal is to make sure you understand the code, understand how it works, and make the decisions that you think are best for your business. And I think anybody who does training in general, if you're educating your clients, you seem to do well in your business model. That works for Coburn as well as works for probably your own business model. Yeah, Buddy, as asking about anything in the north, we're working on that. I don't have the dates exactly, but that is something that we're trying to make sure we touch. If I'm going to go out there, all the way out there, so we'll see if there's a way to get further north and send out a schedule for that.
Where's Buddy?
Buddy, where are you looking at? See if Buddy's still with us. Central and north.
Yes, we're gonna be doing Shreveport and Alexandria coming up here very shortly. So, yes, tell Buddy we're working on it.
Since Rick and I are having this conversation like live and you're all listening, so if it's possible, Rick, let's try to figure out a way to do it that week. If you can squeeze it in, I'll make the time to do it.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, great. Anything else you want to end on, Rick, or
We'll be working with a lot of the heat pump associations around the state, so that's part of it. Coburn's is out to provide the solutions that you guys are going to need to be able to make the satisfy the codes that are being written. We just wanted you to be aware that we're working for you, so you don't have to have to do all the research. We're going to be digging into it for you, so make your life a little easier.
I can tell you that we're helping Rick, and Rick's trying to find out also about the certification form that you need. And there's some other ones that I use in Georgia, so I'm sure we can also make sure we can send you a link to that also. Once you came here today, helps make sure we can keep sending additional communications to you. So that's one of the great things about the webinar is as we find more information, we can send that out as a link to everybody. All right, it's 3:30. I want to thank everybody for giving us their time today. And we appreciate all that you're doing. We really appreciate what Coburn and Rick have offered in terms of making sure that you have a great success out in Louisiana. Jay, do you want to send us off?
Yeah, just want to say thank you to everybody. Again, it's always a pleasure and an honor to get an hour and a half of your time, you busy people, and we really hope that it helps. Remember, I'm Jay West, JWEST at Retrotec.com. If you have any questions, any issues, please feel free to contact me. And if not, or even if you do, please make sure that you stop by one of these Coburn's locations, one of these trainings. I think that you're going to be very satisfied and have a good time. And Rick, thank you so much. It was a pleasure and an honor working with you, sir.
Thank you very much, Jay.